Does that not look dry to you? It's ridiculous. That's not the standard of the Hell's Kitchen.
Damn, I can't believe this contestant just ruined the hell out of his dish. But that's not the only time contestants ruined the Beef Wellington on Hell's Kitchen. And what happened in season 18 will leave you in shock.
Stop. Why have you cut these? Why?
It was the first day for the rookie versus veterans to compete with each other. And each of the groups were all set to impress Chef Ramsay with their newly formed teams. That night, actors Stephanie Beatriz, Carly Hughes, and Sarah Sahi dined in. And the contestants were all geared up to serve these stunning ladies. As a specialty, a tableside of mussels in saffron broth was served by Chris Mendonca from the red team and Heather Williams from the blue team. Would these new teams be able to collaborate for a memorable service? Or would it go down as one of the worst disasters ever? Well, let's find out. In the blue kitchen, T. Georgia was struggling with the orders of scallops and only had one ready since the other wasn't cooked properly. As she was dragging the team down with the other one, a miscommunication happened between T and Ariel Contreras Fox. And Ariel ended up sending the scallops that T deemed improper. In a competition as intense as this one, miscommunication spelled disaster, and it looked like the blue team was already heading into one. With the pan of scallops at the pass, Chef Ramsay rejected them for looking milky. But wait, there seemed to be another problem.
First of all, why are we putting 2 portions in one pan?
Chef, I told you not. Never mind.
T was pissed with Ariel since she never asked her to send it to the pass. She then explained that there were 2 scallops at her station when she only asked for her to take 1. Anyway, as they say, the show must go on. T was able to get the refire accepted, and the blue team pushed out the appetizer orders. But in the midst of it all, Ariel was left looking like a fool. In the red kitchen, Chris stood still in the dining room since none of the diners ordered any tableside. Seeing this, Chef Ramsay pulled him aside into the kitchen and lectured the team by saying this.
So why aren't you in here? Look at me, red team, tall, it's too silent.
When Chris asked his teammates if they could help, none of them replied to him. Then, when Chris told Kevin Cottle that he had to do something, Kevin reluctantly allowed Chris to help him with the fish. But I guess Kevin was regretting his decision since Chris was of no help. He was inconsistent with his timing, and the scallops he made came out raw.
Look what I've got, and we're sending that to customers.
Trev McGrath was annoyed with Chris, and Kevin couldn't believe that he'd actually given Chris a chance. But not anymore. Kevin asked Chris to stay away from their stations and remain at the pass to do this.
You watch
I heard with the pass. Watch the pass and tell us and talk to him.
40 minutes into the service, the blue team moved on to the entrees, and this is where the Wellingtons came into the picture. Mia Castro went ahead and sliced her Wellingtons, but with every slice, the level of disappointment seemed to double.
Under. Under.
That's a lot of Wellingtons wasted. But was her next batch any better? Quite expectedly, it was just as bad. Mia had slaughtered the hell out of her Wellingtons. And just as she was slicing into more of it, Chef Ramsay happened to see it, and he was furious.
Stop. Why have you cut these? Why?
All Mia really had to do was slice the edge and check if the Wellington was done. If it still looked raw, she could stick it right back in the oven and cook it to perfection. But Mia had destroyed the entire batch to pieces. Ariel then suggested to put the Wellingtons back together in the oven so the meat didn't become dry. While the blue team was desperately trying to get back on track, the red kitchen moved on to the entrees. Chef Ramsay had a strange feeling about Scott Lee Innes, so he asked him to multitask. However, when Brett Hauser tried to communicate with Scott Lee, he remained silent and unresponsive. The lack of communication led to Scott Lee sending his garnishes right after Trev sent his Wellingtons to the pass. And this left Chef Ramsay annoyed.
Think a little bit, young man. Maybe a good cook, but you're not sharp enough for me.
In the kitchen, Gizzy Barton was nervous about the lamb orders, so T decided to take the lead. When Chef Ramsay learned of this, he reminded Gizzy to cook confidently. Chef Ramsay also told T to let Gizzy and Mia run their own stations, and if they failed, they would all be eliminated. 1 hour into the service in the red kitchen, Kevin thought that only 1 salmon was required. But when Chef Ramsay called for 2 salmon, Kevin started to blame Scott Lee. He now needed the salmon to be ready real quick. And to get this task done in 6 minutes, Kevin took a risk and added some very hot butter to the pan, hoping Chef Ramsay wouldn't notice. However, when Kevin sent it to the pass, Chef Ramsay was dismayed by how the salmon was cooked. To make things worse, when Kevin asked if the salmon was raw, Chef Ramsay lost it.
Do me a favor, I'll finish this off in the storeroom and sort your differences out.
As the red team went to the pantry to sort things out, Scott Lee pissed Kevin off. He said that he couldn't keep track of the orders while keeping track of the garnishes, even though Chris promised to keep watch of the pass. Back in the kitchen, the red team was ready to bounce back. But then, when Brett sent his Wellington with sauce to the pass, the sauce came out cold. This was the last straw, and Chef Ramsay kicked them out of the kitchen by saying this.
Enough's enough. I've taken all night. Every table's been a battle, and I'm done.
The only saving grace was the blue team, who stayed till the end and finished their service. But in this next service, one contestant had his worst performance yet. And thanks to him, Chef Ramsay had to do something he's never done on Hell's Kitchen before. With only 7 chefs remaining in season 11, everyone was aware that the competition would only get harder. That night, 2 VIPs were hosted by Hell's Kitchen, Maria Manunos, who was served by the blue team, and Jeremy Sisto, who was served by the red team. That night, we also got to see Jim O'Hare dine in as well. The red team received their first ticket, and as they started working on it, Mary Ponelt was seen with her tongue out. And seeing this, Chef Ramsay chided her by saying this.
Cook with your tongue in, please. You look like a cat.
I'm
Let's
sorry,
go.
Chef.
In the blue kitchen, the team was working on Manunos' order. When Chef Ramsay said that he wanted the scallops out in one, Anthony Rodriguez seemed confused. He was caught picking out the scallops one by one, and this left Chef Ramsay dismayed. Chef Ramsay then berated Anthony by saying,
Out in one.
Yes,
How
Chef.
many times? And you're there fiddling around like an old granny in a hardware store.
Despite that, Anthony's scallops were perfectly cooked, and the team was able to get Manunos' appetizers out. In the red kitchen, Cindy Stanimirov and Mary were pushing out appetizers. However, Mary was late in delivering the lobster tail for their next order. Though Mary apologized to Chef Ramsay, she blamed Cindy for not communicating with her, and this made Chef Ramsay annoyed.
Wake up! Talk to her! You're putting your team behind!
But it wasn't just about sloppy communication. Just as the team's VIPs came in, Chef Ramsay noticed how messy Cindy's station was. He then asked her to keep the risotto on the pan since she had splashed it everywhere, and berated her by saying this.
And you're working like a dirty little pig. I don't like it.
After all that, when Cindy sent her risotto to the pass, she only had enough for 5 even though 6 were on order. And this made Chef Ramsay furious.
We're slowing down, you're dragging the kitchen, they're falling behind.
Despite the problem, the red team served their VIP table and was halfway to moving on to the entrees. 45 minutes into the service, the blue team didn't really seem to be far behind. While John Scallion's risottos were well received, Anthony made a mistake by cooking 1 lobster tail when 2 were needed. While John claimed that he said 2 risottos, Anthony said that he only heard 1. To make matters worse, the lobster tail that Anthony made was overcooked. And seeing this kind of miscommunication, Chef Ramsay berated him.
You're the only weak link in this chain right now.
Anthony finally got his 3rd attempt accepted, and both the teams finished the appetizers and moved on to the entrees. In the blue kitchen, Anthony and Zach Womack were communicating pretty well. But despite that, Anthony sent up his sea bass even though Zach wasn't ready with his meat. Soon enough, Chef Ramsay accused Zach of dragging his team down. After this small hiccup, Zach wanted to redeem himself and finally got his lamb accepted. An hour and a half into the service, Anthony sent up some raw halibut. Chef Ramsay was infuriated. Ramsay first called the entire blue team over and showed them the raw halibut. He then took Anthony to the pantry room and gave him a good lecture for his subpar performance by saying this.
Every other fish is cooked, every other fish is undercooked. Get a grip!
Back in the red kitchen, Janelle Witt sent up some poorly made sauteed mushrooms, which made Chef Ramsay unapologetically compare it to barf. Despite the problem, Janelle got her refire accepted, and the VIPs received their entrees as well. In the blue kitchen, Anthony got his refire accepted, but Zach sent up a Wellington that was raw. Zach tried to make an excuse, but Chef Ramsay was fed up with it and asked him to give a straight answer.
Does that not look dry to you?
Yes, Chef, it looks
Right,
dry.
it's ridiculous.
Chef Ramsay then had to send out the order incomplete. However, things got worse when Zach declared that he had no more Wellingtons ready to cook. And with the hesitation, he told Chef Ramsay that it would take 20 minutes to have the next one ready. A frustrated Chef Ramsay, seeing no other option, went to the red kitchen and did something that he's never done before on Hell's Kitchen.
Are these extra? I need these.
You can take them all, Chef.
The blue team was embarrassed to have the red team help them out, but it is what it is, and there was no way out of it. The red team was going at a great pace, and they soon finished their entrees and moved on to the desserts. 2.5 hours into the service, the blue team was on their final order, which was for the VIPs. With the hope of not making any mistakes on the VIP tickets, Zach desperately tried to up his game. But he failed to recite the order correctly. While Zach wanted to end his own horror story, Chef Ramsay discovered an overcooked lamb at his station which looked like elephant dung. Zach tried to argue that he was waiting on the fish, but Chef Ramsay was getting beyond annoyed with Zach's performance. He then threatened to eliminate him on the spot if he made another mistake.
Give me
one more excuse, I swear to God. Take your jacket and f off out of here.
When Zach didn't give a response, Chef Ramsay had enough and took over the station himself. However, Zach wasn't done annoying Chef Ramsay. While Chef Ramsay was working on the VIP table, Zach started asking him questions regarding the meat. This annoyed the famous chef, and this is what happened next.
Now he's asking me stupid questions. Hey chef, can I change my pants? One mistake and so frazzled.
That was embarrassing. But nothing compared to this next service where one contestant blamed the other for their own mistakes. And the result? Everything broke apart. Their confidence, their integrity, and yes, the Beef Wellington as well. As both teams were getting ready for the service, Tommy Stevens told Elise Harris that she had to score herself while she unwrapped the Wellingtons. Though Queen Elise said that she would, she also complained about what a poor job Tommy was doing with the prep. Chef Ramsay hoped that both teams would perform well after the New York strip they made the previous day. As the service began, the red team received their first order. Communication is the key to success, but Elise forgot about that since she didn't respond to Jennifer Norman's request. In the blue kitchen, the team received their first order, and Natalie Blake hoped to bounce back after her poor performance. However, when she brought her scallops to the pass, they were inconsistently cooked, making Chef Ramsay frustrated.
Look at that! You got them cooked one side, and what's that? They're not even seared!
In the red kitchen, Elizabeth Bianchi was pushing out the scallop orders. But she soon got confused with the orders and slowed down the entire process. This led to Chef Ramsay asking Elise to help her, and thanks to that, Elizabeth's scallops were finally accepted. In the blue kitchen, the team finally moved on to the entrees. Sous Chef Scott reminded Tommy to put the onion rings on a paper towel when they were out of the fryer, and he was so pissed that he even threatened to beat him with a ring. Despite the warnings, Tommy's rings came out soggy.
Onion ring, like a handful of onion worms, soggy.
Regardless of all that, the blue team was pushing out their entrees at a steady pace. 1 hour into the service, both teams served half of their diners. But in the red kitchen, Elizabeth sent up a dry sea bass with a burnt bottom on their next order. Chef Ramsay was dismayed. Elise saw Elizabeth as the weakest chef, but then she made a mistake on the Wellingtons herself by sending out improperly scored ones. Obviously, this made Chef Ramsay furious. Then Ramsay ordered Elise to bring over the tray of Wellingtons and discovered that she scored all of them way too deep. This led to the pastry breaking apart. However, Elise blamed Tommy for the first tray. Then Chef Ramsay brought it to the blue kitchen to tell Tommy about it. Soon after, Elise, in a very authoritative tone, asked Tommy if he had scored them. When Tommy said no, Elise went into a screaming mode to prove that it was Tommy's fault. He then reminded her that he had told her about the scoring before the service, like we mentioned, and if she didn't believe it, she could hit replay. Chef Ramsay was infuriated seeing the lack of responsibility from Elise.
Who are you gonna blame? Carrie? Krupa? Jamie?
In the dining room, the red diners were left without any food, leaving them really hungry. But this didn't mean the blue diners didn't face any problems. One of the blue diners' sea bass came out way too dry. When the halibut returned to the kitchen, Chef Ramsay made everyone touch it and asked Natalie what she was doing. She then admitted that she didn't know what she was doing, and Chef Ramsay was extremely annoyed with her irresponsibility.
No, I don't know what I'm doing.
Hey, you hit the nail on the head there. You don't know what you're doing. It's not good enough.
To make matters worse, 3 more sea bass were returned for being overcooked. Natalie claimed that she knew how to cook a sea bass, but a very angry Chef Ramsay told her this.
So the customers are lying. The day we, as chefs, start blaming customers.
In the red kitchen, Elise and Elizabeth were so invested in their own catfight that they forgot about the most important thing, the customers. The two contestants constantly got into arguments about the timings of their respective dishes, and nothing seemed to be going right for either of them. First, everybody was waiting for Elizabeth to give a time, and when she finally gave one, her timing was inconsistent. Eventually, Elizabeth sent her sea bass to the pass, but it came out raw, and this frustrated Chef Ramsay.
I feel like I had that fish down for like 10 minutes.
You're blaming the fish.
Ramsay then asked her to get it back in the pan, but he couldn't understand what the confusion was all about. Elizabeth was mentally absent the entire service. But it's not like Elise was any better. Sometime later, Chef Ramsay saw Elise slicing the New York strip and declaring that she would need 1 more minute. While Elise walked up to the oven with the strip, Chef Ramsay was worried that the strip would dry out and be wasted. Chef Ramsay then made a sarcastic comment, but Elise surprisingly nodded her head like she was in agreement with him. But from his past experience, he knew that Elise couldn't take any form of criticism. So he mockingly did this.
Look, she just shakes her head. Hold on. Cry time?
No.
Despite that, Elise sent an already sliced New York strip loin back into the oven. And when she sent it to the pass, it came out overcooked and dry, just as Chef Ramsay said some time earlier. These two contestants were driving Chef Ramsay mad. He was so disappointed that he called Elise over and said this.
This is like night one in here.
No, chef.
Elizabeth, you can't time and you can't talk to anybody.
And for his own peace of mind, Chef Ramsay had to do something about the two, so this is what he decided to do.
Get out of here, both of you. Just leave me alone.
I can almost feel the extent of frustration in his voice. Chef Ramsay was over and done with these two. But remember how I told you that Elise couldn't take criticism very well? Well, take a look at what she did on her way out of the kitchen. Elise actually kicked the garbage bin down on her way out. Do you really think Chef Ramsay was gonna overlook something this disrespectful in his kitchen? Obviously not. Chef Ramsay ordered her to walk right back, pick up the bin, keep it back where it belongs, and said this.
Overcooked meat, now start kicking the bin. Pathetic! Embarrassing!
Now, only Jennifer was left in the kitchen, and with the help of sous chef Andy and Chef Ramsay, she was able to get all the orders done. So these were the times when chefs completely ruined the Beef Wellington on Hell's Kitchen. Who knows, there may be contestants who completely ruin other dishes in future services.